This episode is brought to you by Rex Air Professional Pilot Academy of Sebring, Florida. They've got everything a flight student needs to be successful. So give them a call, 309-397-6191, or drop them a line, info@rexair.net. If you have never met or come across Jamail Larkins, you have missed out. So let me make your life a little bit easier and introduce you to the man himself, Jamail Larkins. Jamail, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. It's great to see you. I'm really looking forward to talking to you today.
Well, Jamie, it is definitely a pleasure to be here with you today.
Now, just for some background, you've been involved in aviation for your age bracket longer than most people because you started young. Would you like to tell that story real quick about how you managed to fly an airplane before the American authorities would illegally allow you?
So I guess the easiest way to start off with it is I was a gamer. I guess the first generation of what we would call gamers today. I played Microsoft Flight Simulator for hours and hours every single day after I got home from school. I then got the courage after about 2 years of doing that to write on an aviation chat room and said, "Hey, I'm a 12-year-old kid from Augusta, Georgia. Does anybody have any advice for me? I want to become an airline pilot and I want to know how to get started." And a Delta Airlines captain wrote me back and told me about a youth program called the Young Eagles program. And I went on my very first flight, got hooked on flying. And then very quickly, I realized the cost of taking flying lessons after that Young Eagles flight. And so I was trying to think outside of the box. How could I lower the cost of flying for myself? And being an idealistic 13-year-old kid that did not understand the problems and complexities of the world, I was like, I'm paying for a flight instructor to go flying with me. And a year into it, he wasn't doing anything other than just being a glorified babysitter. And I was like, I could save 75 bucks an hour if I don't have to have him doing this. So I wrote a letter to the FAA at 13 years old asking them if they would allow me to start flying before my 16th birthday solo without realizing what was involved in it. I flew with six different flight instructors, two designated flight examiners. All of them wrote letters to the FAA saying that I could safely handle an airplane in solo flight. They wrote me back saying we need more information. I did not understand that was a polite brush off. I thought it really meant that I had a chance. And so I kept on working on what could I provide for them. But during this time frame, I started flying to air shows. I went to Sun and Fun in Oshkosh, and I met a Young Eagles pilot by the name of Lloyd Richards in Timmins, Ontario, Canada, of all places. And he recognized me at Oshkosh from volunteering at one of the youth centers there from Sun and Fun, and was like, "I remember you. Who are you?" We started talking. I was telling him what I was trying to do with the FAA. He said, "Well, if you want to, you can come up to Canada and fly solo up there at 14." So a new mission was created. Um, my parents didn't have the funds for me to be able to go up to Timmins, Ontario, Canada at the age of 14. So I decided to raise it on my own. And I rode over 100 different aviation companies. And 93 of them told me no, but a few of them did say yes. And I got the funds I need to see to go up to Canada at the age of 14, fly solo up there, and the rest is history.
I love about that story. There's about five examples of the audaciousness most people don't have that Jamail is not at all shy about. I really
Well,
like that.
the sad thing is, I think I probably have become more in tune to what normal society says is right today compared to what I was like that. But I'm trying to get back to that old Jamel and make some bigger things even happen now.
Well, you wrote a series of articles for General Aviation News that I want to talk to you about. I've been writing a weekly column for them for 15 years, but the three things you brought up are things that have been on my mind and I've kind of danced around the edges. But you were talking about basically the dropout rate in training in general aviation is about 80%, which many people would find shocking, but it is legitimate. And there are reasons for that. First one you brought up being cost. What's your perspective on that? And you just mentioned when you were a kid, that was a challenge.
I mean, I'm a great example of that. You might have the dream of being inside of the cockpit, but especially if you're a teenager in college, it's really expensive. And even if you're a professional, a grown adult that may even have a career, spending $20,000 for your private pilot's license, which is about what it will cost these days, is somewhat sometimes hard to come up with. So cost is definitely one of the major factors. Just to go on where these top three reasons came from, I did a survey, informal survey on social media, and I said, "Hey, what are the top reasons that almost made you quit learning how to fly?" And cost was the number one thing. Everybody kept on saying, especially for people that want to become a commercial airline pilot or become a professional pilot in general, you're looking at spending over $100,000 to go from zero to hero inside of general aviation, just to be able to have that time for you to get inside of a turbine powered airplane and be able to start making a real income from it. A lot of people don't have $100,000 of cash sitting inside of their bank account to become a professional pilot, because typically you're looking at someone that's a little bit younger, on the younger demographic for that. And if your parents don't have the resources for it, you have to come up with that cash somehow, some way. They're now, at least, there are loans available. Some of those loans might be more expensive, high interest rate loans, but one of the things that I think a lot of people need to look at is the value proposition for becoming, like, especially if you're looking to go the 121 route. I saw a recent survey that was done, that said for the average 35-year commercial airline pilot, lifetime career earnings is going to be on the United States as low as $10 million and as high as $21 million. So you have to think about it. Today, you could go from graduating high school and without having to go to college, get into the pipeline, start training and getting towards that. And if you can make $10 to $20 million over the next 35 years after you do that, I think that's a pretty strong ROI. But I'm not necessarily recommending to people to go out there and get high interest rate loans, but at least evaluate all of your options out there.
No, I'm a big believer in that. Not to interrupt you, but I've always I'm a high school graduate. I quit college because my band was doing well. I mean, I figured you could go back later. But in all honesty, if I was advising an 18-year-old kid today who's adamant, I want to go to the airlines,
Yeah,
then this summer when you get out of school, start your full-time flight training, get your
yeah,
tickets and start building experience, because you can do online college, you can do part-time
yes.
college, you can pick it up later, or like you and I both have very successful careers. I don't know your educational background, but mine is not stellar.
I did go to Embry-Riddle. I graduated with a bachelor's in aviation business there, and that's 4 years of my life. But I also understand that it's not a requirement for every single degree, or every single career field, excuse me, today. So, I still recommend for people to at least have that as a backup, because if you do end up losing your medical, if you do end up having some sort of issue that prevents you from being able to fly, it's nice to have a plan B that you can plan on and survive on, and not then have to worry about, hey, I need to get a 4-year degree to qualify for some office job that might be available. So I still recommend doing a 4-year degree, especially if you're on the younger side. But it's not a requirement, and everybody's particular circumstances are different. So whether you have the money from your family to be able to do it, whether you need to get a loan to be able to do it, or the part that I have been a big advocate about this year since we created Aviation Start, in April of this year. You were there with me at Sun and Fun when we started talking about it. Is there's a ton of scholarships out there. Our industry does recognize that 83% of all the mechanics that are working today are scheduled to retire within the next 10 years. We've got close to 50% of all the pilots that are going to be inside of the cockpit will be brand new during that same time frame. But aviation does not have the cachet that it did 20, 30 years
Right.
ago. And people are considering other things despite a $500,000 a year top earning airline pilot salaries that exist out there. It still just doesn't have the same appeal. So I'm really excited that the industry is starting to recognize that we've got a looming workforce crisis, and we need to make it easier for people to get involved inside of the industry. And after seeing the responses on that informal social media survey saying, cost is the number one thing, I was surprised to find out that there's over $21 million worth of scholarships right now, and I know that there's more out there. So we're hoping to be able to make it easier for people. They go to aviationstart.org. It's a completely free resource, and people can find all of the scholarships out there, whether it's through our favorite group AOPA, and others, to small regional aviation associations. There's a lot of opportunities. People just need to find them.
I'm so glad you brought up aviationstart.org because we did talk about it back in April. I'm really intrigued by that site because you and I both experienced the same two issues early on in our flight training: ignorance of the process, which costs you a lot of time and money, and then dealing with a flight school or a flight instructor that's not really motivated to help us succeed as much as
Yeah.
they are motivated to fill their logbook. And I hate to say that, but that's out there. In aviation, especially in training, time is directly connected to money. If you can cut down on the time it takes, you dramatically cut down on the cost. Aviationstart.org provides that initial networking where you start to understand what's going on. I can look into scholarships, I can look into flight training, I can start learning the language, because the better prepared you are when you start, you're just asking more intelligent questions and you start understanding something that both of us have experienced in our careers. That instructor or that school's not working out. I need to make a change. That doesn't make me a bad guy. That has to happen. You've done that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, and so you hit on the number three point that happened inside our the number three topic or reason why people quit flight training, which is personality clashes. Like if you and I in any other industry, if we're paying literally $5 or more a minute for an experience, we're going to expect white glove type service. Inside of flight training in aviation, that's not necessarily the case. You're going to still pay that $5 or more a minute, but you're going to sometimes not be treated the way that you would expect to be treated. And that's something that I hope the industry works on a little bit more. But if you still are going to do that and potentially be subjected to a experience that you don't find the greatest, you need to at least be willing to switch if that experience isn't up to what you want it to be. Because there are going to be instructors, or there are going to be flight schools, or there are going to be other aircraft that you can fly that meet your expectations. Whether it's an instructor that is maybe a little bit more committed to helping you succeed than filling up their own logbook, whether it's a flight school that is coming up with all sorts of crazy fees that might exist that aren't necessarily at the other flight school right around the corner, or maybe your learning style doesn't match with your instructor's teaching style.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, I think a lot of people in aviation are under this concept that you're married to your flight instructor, that as soon as you get them, no matter if you guys have almost a knockout drag out, you're still married to them and you can't switch. And we need to help people learn that if it's not going well inside of the cockpit, you need to switch. Because the other thing is, in most general aviation airplanes, you got pretty much 40 inches that you're talking about.
You're
If I
touching.
don't
You're,
enjoy,
you're literally
yeah,
touching each other.
if I don't enjoy your company, I would never go on a road trip with you for a 40-hour road trip. So why in aviation do we have this concept that if we don't get along, let's stay in that same 40-inch space and do more than a 40-hour road trip, and then on top of that, make the intensity of learning a complex subject, make that space even more dramatic. It just doesn't make sense.
I think part of it, in all honesty, Jamail, I think part of it is people are reticent to involve themselves in conflict, and they think it's going to be an ugly situation. If you're my CFI and I just don't think we're clicking, I might like you a lot, but I'm just not understanding. I'm not making progress, and I say after a flight, Jamail, I think I want to make a change. I'm not making the progress I want, and can you recommend somebody? That's a perfectly reasonable request. If your CFI or the flight school gets mad about that, you're using the wrong CFI and the flight school. Their
100%.
job, as you say, you're paying a fair amount of money. Their job is to help you become successful. And if that's not happening, asking for a change is perfectly reasonable.
I mean, again, If you're paying $5 or more a minute, you want white glove service, but that's typically not what we get inside of the aviation industry. And if you're not necessarily getting the experience you want, switch. There's nothing wrong with it. And it's required if you want to have a successful career inside of this industry. Why waste time in an experience that you're not enjoying, that you're not getting what you need out of it to have a successful career? Focus on what you need, but also understand that sometimes it might be your fault. If you show up unprepared for your next lesson and your instructor is frustrated that you have to go do the same thing that you just covered the previous lesson, or you forgot airspaces, or whatever the case may be, it's a partnership. The student has to do their part as well as the flight school and the CFI has to do theirs.
Absolutely true. Which brings us to number two on your list, which I actually think might be the most important because it's the most difficult hurdle to clear, and that's
Yeah.
health and especially mental health. The FAA has not always been great about that. And I will give you an example. Years ago, I had a friend who unfortunately his wife and he lost their 5 year old to cancer, which is devastating. But he was a commercial
Sure.
airline pilot and he was aware I can't go see somebody about this. I just got to suck it up because if I go to a mental health professional because I'm depressed or despondent or feeling any of the things that are normal human things to feel when you've lost a child, I could lose my medical and my income. Just adds to it. And I'm not dumping on the FAA. They've made great changes in the health field over the last couple decades, but you're one of the few people who's brought that up explicitly, that health and mental health is an issue, especially since we've got an entire generation of kids who were diagnosed as ADHD as small
Yeah.
children and medicated because of it. And there's a carry-on effect to that.
Yeah. 10 years ago, if you had taken any medication like Adderall or something along those lines, it was just impossible for you to even get a medical, even once you got off of it. Fortunately, we are starting to see some movement with the FAA on things that they want to ensure that safety is still held to the same level, if not higher. But they're recognizing that just because you might have been on Adderall or some sort of medication years ago, it does not mean that you can't safely hold a medical and be able to fly an airplane going forward and be safe about it. So there is some progress. We still have a lot more room to grow or go. I am excited to see some of the things that are working its way through Congress, as well as at the FAA, that's really aimed on trying to help correct some of these situations. One thing that we talked about, that you know, Jamie, is if you fall into that category of potentially being denied a medical, I think it is extremely important to contact organizations like AOPA and talk to their pilot information center and get advice from their medical team on not how to hide things, but how to properly disclose it in a way that the FAA is going to accept it or be comfortable with it. And, just small wording differences on how you talk to your AME or how you write something on your medical could potentially prevent you from having a multi-year delay and being able to get your training
You're
going.
so right. You're
So
so right. I
before you do
I've
that,
given this advice for
go ahead.
years, and I really do believe this is the best course of action. And I've talked to AMEs, aviation medical examiners, about this. If you think there might be a problem with you getting a medical, rather than going through the Med Express program and applying for it, make an appointment with that doctor for a consultation. Doctor patient
Yep.
privilege is in effect. Be honest with them. Tell them your condition. Tell them your concerns. Tell them what you want to do. I want a class two. I want a class one. Is that possible? Ask for advice and they can provide it. It may be the thing you're worried about is no big deal. For instance, like diabetes, which used to be a big deal. No, not so much. There
Yeah.
are doctors, AMEs, who specialize in mental health issues where they will document you've been off this medication for X amount of time, you're stable, you've had no incidents, blah, blah, blah. But the big thing is if you make that, as you well know, Jamail, if I make that appointment through Med Express, now it's a medical. It's going to be deferred
Yes.
or denied, or now I've got real problems. So, yeah, the Pilot Information Center, AOPA, is great, but do a consultation if there's any doubt. And at the very least, you'll now find out, do I have an advocate on the FAA side who's going to help me?
Yeah. I mean, it's very important to get that information before you go for that medical, because once again, as soon as you that's submitted, as you know, on MedExpress, it's stuck with you for life, and it could potentially have repercussions for the rest of your pilot
Mhm.
career. So it's something that more people need to be aware of, is whether it's a consultation with your AME, whether it's joining AOPA or some other aviation organization in advance, doing those different types of activities to be better prepared before you start the process can save you a ton of money and a substantial amount of headache.
Man, I could talk to you about this stuff all day. You are so knowledgeable. You've been in it so long, and you are a successful guy. You've flown aerobatics and air shows. You've flown long distances. You're just everywhere. But, in the interest of not putting anybody to sleep, I think we should probably wrap this up. Let's just summarize and say, if you want to become a pilot, you probably can. If cost is an issue, there's scholarships, there's loans, and as you said, there is earning potential out there that justifies spending $100,000.
Yeah.
If you have a medical issue, that AME can help you, provided you do it the right way. And if you're not getting along with your instructor, if I decide I just can't stand it, Jamal, it's okay to go to somebody else. They're not going to get cranky about it.
Absolutely. And you're not married.
Yeah. So I suppose I should suggest people go to aviationstart.org because it really is a great place to start the journey. Even if you're a sport pilot or private pilot and you start thinking, maybe I want to do this as a career. Having more information is always
And
better. Knowing one more person is always great. And I'll put your phone number on the bathroom wall. That way people can find it. And we're all good.
I appreciate that. I mean, it's a free resource. So if you ever have thought about it or interested in it, please come check us out at aviationstart.org, and hopefully we can connect you with either some of these aviation outreach programs or scholarship that make your dreams become a reality.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. And I know you'll be watching next week right here on Mad Props Aero.